The Talk CXO Roundtable is a platform for high-profile talks and conversations with leaders and experts like you from diverse backgrounds on the need for ideas, innovation that transform leaders, impact organizations, and helps develop evolving strategic business models. This is an initiative of The Talk, which is a new media thought leadership platform. Thank you, Satish, for organizing this. This event is brought to you by the Elegance Advisor Consultancy, which is founded by Ms. Taylor Elizabeth. She works with executives, entrepreneurs, corporations to help empower individuals and teams around the world to develop effective and professional personal brands. Thank you, Elizabeth, for this show. So, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed HR leaders and distinguished participants, welcome to this virtual gathering of insightful minds, a convergence of thought leaders in the realm of businesses and human resources. So as we start today, I like to highlight two pivotal pillars that actually shape the destiny of all our businesses, be it small, medium, or large corporations: the emotional intelligence and effective communication. I stress upon this fact quite often. And imagine you are navigating in a vast sea in a boat. The vast sea represents the unpredictable waters of the business world. The captain of the vessel isn't just equipped with technical knowledge, but also need to have an understanding of the ever-changing undercurrents that are beneath the surface. So these emotional currents, consider it as EI, the emotional intelligence. And effective communication is actually the wind that propels our business boat, guiding it towards success. So in our discussion today, I would love to hear your individual stories, interesting insights, with the hope that it can help unlock potential for so many organizations and leaders who watch this show. So welcome you all once again. Welcoming the esteemed panelists, Ms. Vasundhara Chakravarti, Head HR Payarian Services, Ms. Sripriya Subramani. Welcome, Vasundhara. Ms. Sripriya Subramani, Head HR Honeywell Connected Service. Welcome, Priya. Mr. Praveen Kamath, GM HR Wipro. Is also an educationist come coach. Ms. Dechan Mohanty, Senior HR Business Partner, SVB Financial Group. And we will be joining in by, I think, Dr. Purushottam Bang, who's the Director of RV Institute of Management. So the first question is, I think I would love to have everyone answer it in the same order that I just mentioned. It's easy to track at my end. How do EI directly influence an organization's success or a failure? Priya, we'll start. Maybe we'll start with you, Vasundhara.
You'll have to please repeat your question once for me.
Yeah, how do emotional intelligence directly influence an organization's success or failure?
So I would start by saying this. It's not so much about an individual's competency and skills in the technical and functional space that enables a person's ability to succeed, but more so his ability to work with the team, because you're only as strong as your team is. And how do you bond with your team to leverage the best outcomes from each of them? It is by way of having a positive relationship impact. And that stems with a very strong emotional quotient that the individuals, especially at the leadership level, need to demonstrate a very strong emotional quotient to be able to work with varied sets of individuals and stakeholders who can then impact success. This is something which I believe in, and I have seen time and again that you have a strong leader and with a good emotional intelligence, the productivity of the team and the outcomes, expected organizational outcomes, are so much more enhanced.
Sure, absolutely. Good. Your take on this, Priya?
I have a very interesting take on this, Shyam, and I think in my past experiences also, this is something that I've always struggled to teach or coach my leaders with. starting off, I think one of the most important things for the success of an organization, as you mentioned, is emotional intelligence. And in that, the core of it is really getting your leaders to be able to understand what that really means. And one of the things that has worked for me when I was in my earlier organizations is to be able to train them on what it is to be emotionally intelligent. And through that, what I've seen my leaders and also some of the employees being able to do is to resolve conflicts easily, right? Like being able to confront situations and say, this is going wrong, and I want to pick up the phone and talk to you. But setting that base saying, this organization, this team is emotionally intelligent and they want the right outcomes and they're all driving towards that. I think that's really the starting point. But from that stems a whole bunch of things, right? Be it effective leadership, how successful are you as a leader? And that's beautifully touched by Basundhara as well when she spoke about it. And of course, the entire collaboration quotient in a team. And if all of these, like decision making, happens through good emotional intelligence, more importantly, you're able to listen to understand rather than listen to really react to everything that the other individual is saying. And you're able to also effectively resolve those conflicts that are coming your way. Because what you're doing is you're pausing and understanding what the other person is saying. And that comes with a lot of emotional intelligence. Otherwise, pride and ego generally takes over. So I do believe very strongly that emotional quotient is such an important thing in an organization and could lead to failure or successes in an organization. And then, of course, leadership driving that culture becomes really critical.
Fantastic. Praveen, I would love to have your words on this. You can unmute, please.
I think businesses are here to win and make money. And you can make money by having the right people for the universe of the organization. If organizations are consisting of people, emotion is non-negotiable, which will come with you ever since you are given birth to this universe. Emotions, your ability to recognize emotions, understand emotions, manage emotions has been one of the pitfalls of most of the failures of any universe of business.
True.
Greatest of the wars have been fought. Largest of the universe of business have been collapsed because we miserably failed to understand the talent quotient which is being managed by people through their emotions. We are very good at managing our finances, markets, our customers, our ecosystems in terms of supplies, our landscapes of doing business. But when it comes to people, I think, have we done enough? I think research will prove it otherwise. Research have proven that as businesses have grown, we have certainly have contributed to enough problems with talent from an emotional quotient standpoint. So emotional intelligence, seemingly the rock star for success and failures of large organizations. Let me micromanage my insight here by telling all of us, how many of us in this own group will be having very, very difficult conversation when we have to let go of people. Giving feedback has been one of the biggest opportunity area for many of us, starting from our own family, being with our own spouse or our siblings, giving feedback or navigating a change conversation or change management, managing setbacks and failures, dealing with challenging relationship. If I may say, I've just given you these 4 examples for all of us to realize these are the 4 key actionables which will give us an opportunity to understand an important segment of human relationship called emotional intelligence.
Absolutely. Can't agree more. Dechan, your thoughts, please.
Let me take Praveen's statement a little further ahead. Businesses are here to make money by serving a market need. Both organizations and markets are made of people. people are governed by their emotions. And when we talk about emotional intelligence, it is a universal aspect that whether you are at home, whether you are at work, whether you are making a decision at market or in the organization, there is a high impact of your emotions and emotional intelligence. And what is emotional intelligence? At its very base, it is about being self-aware about your own emotions and also being aware of the impact that your actions or your decisions may have on others. If we get this fundamental right, then you know that in a world where you're constantly interacting, even when you are working virtually, even when you are working behind a gadget, an iPhone or a Zoom meeting, you're constantly emoting and relaying those cues. If you simplify the problem, or rather the statement that how or the impact of emotional intelligence on a workplace, it is but inevitable. It is like saying that human beings need water to survive, right? If you accept that and bring it to the forefront, then there can be measures to effectively use it as a tool. Organizations that are able to understand that emotions run decisions very heavily, they back decisions very heavily. Emotions define our buying decisions, selling decisions, decisions that we take for ourselves, for our organizations. Then we will be able to put efforts into enhancing and putting that into use. Emotionally intelligent organizations foster great environments for exchanging information, conversations. That's where you uncover customer needs. That's where you uncover employee motivations. And then we are able to put the best resources forward to marry the needs and the motivations.
Nice. Thanks. Taylor, I would love to have your insights on this.
Well, thank you very much. And I just would like to take a moment to thank everybody for being here today. So as I was introduced before, I am an emotional intelligence coach, communications coach, and etiquette expert. I'm based in Dubai. However, I'm in the United States currently. There isn't to add. There are so many different things that have been said that are spot on when it comes to emotional intelligence. There isn't really much more to add, except for the fact that I would say that emotional intelligence is the language and the intelligence of the human condition, which for many years, we as business people, as focusing on bottom line, focusing on productivity, focusing on efficiency, on retention, et cetera, I think we avoided or we removed the human condition many different years because we were focusing maybe on the interests and the emotions of the potential client, but not of our own teams, and especially not of our leadership, which I think is a huge example. Thinking about emotional intelligence and the key of the success of a company is going to be the emotional intelligence of its leadership, as it will not only flow down towards in the rest of the team, but you can't possibly reach goals, have legacy, create constructive culture, any of these things, if the leader itself does not have awareness as to what emotional intelligence is and how it will positively affect their ability, either themselves professionally, but also their ability to lead teams. Because as was very well said in many different ways, you know, the value of any company is the human element of it. It's teams are made of people and companies are made of people and they're selling to people and we're all people communicating and working with amongst each other. So if we are not speaking the right language, if we're not aware of the condition, we are not being efficient, no matter what numbers are saying. We are not optimizing as much as we possibly could, and we're not leading as well as we could as well. So I think the fundamental of success and failure is figuring out how to really master, having our leadership be more aware as to what emotional intelligence is and how you can translate that within your teams, the value proposition there, and then how it will support all these different elements. It will make their managing their teams so much easier, more effective. And then again, your bottom line is affected, your strategic planning is affected, everything is affected, especially your communications is affected. So that's what I would just like to add. Thank you.
Fantastic. I think it's all, end of the day, it's all people, and the emotions are well connected. So with that, Now that with this remote work is in place, thanks to all the changes, the transformation that the business have seen, how does it change the way organizations approach the emotional intelligence and communications today? So I would like to have Dechun take this first, please.
In a world where we are digital first, remote first, the need for emotional intelligence and bringing that to the table and practicing actively is everybody's business. And it has become more important than ever to practice it on an everyday basis. You still need people to collaborate, feel happy, learn from each other, have honest conversations, ideate, and no great things were achieved individually. We need teams to succeed together. For all of that, you need to have a good team bonding, a good culture, both the sub-team culture as well as the org culture. But let's talk about teams. In a remote setting, it's very easy for employees to detach or be disengaged because everybody is working out of a very different work environment, which could be their home office, which could be in young professionals. It could be in a very unorganized or not so comfortable, physically comfortable places, or in terms of leaders where they are seeing new ways or new avenues in which they need to exercise their leadership. So EQ has become extremely important and no longer a nice to practice once a year conversation to be measured in engagement surveys. It is an everyday business. And how do you ensure that you have a practice of EQ in a remote setup? You will feel the difference in how you make decisions about the team. If it's a decision about the team, are the team members participating in that decision? For example, how frequently do you need to come to office? Now, it's a very touchy topic. Organizations want employees to come back. You still get to the end result, but how much do you engage with your teams? How much of a lead time do you give them to adjust to the new normal? How much are we factoring in the changes that they might have undergone because of virtually working for 2 to 3 years? I think that's extremely critical to start with.
Sure. How does it get managed at your end, Praveen?
Whether it is offline, online, whether it is in person or in experiential learning environment, I think for me, it hardly matters. The environment matters to about 10 to 20% because that's the ecosystem in which you operationalize your day-to-day work. I think my point of view here would be if you need to manage as an organization, every leader has to learn the art of coaching. The coaching skills might include how do we help people to help themselves in terms of self-awareness, self-regulation, what are those anchors for motivating themselves in highs and lows of business, and how do I architect my ability to be empathetic, both in good and bad times, because the factors, whether you work from office or you work from home, will be agnostic when it comes to results of business. Results of business will not categorize, I could achieve these results because I work from home. So the business anchors are agnostic of the environment from which you are operating. Business outcomes are largely a function of competition and the landscape changing drastically and extremely quickly. So self-awareness, self-regulation, and keeping them highly motivated, whether they work from office or from home.
Okay, so that's not a big challenge. How does it work for you, Priya?
I think Praveen brought out a very, very important point just 2 seconds ago about how it's important to bring people back to work, whether it is working from home or office doesn't really make a difference. But at the same time, one struggle that we've had, at least in the current organization that I work with, is bringing employees back to work. And I'm sure that every organization struggles with it. A couple of things that we've been able to do, and that then again touches back on how COVID happened, you really went emotionally missing for your employees, right? You were not there, and everything was virtual. That also set off a different set of problems for the employee itself. Like, they were used to being alone. Whether they liked it or not, they thought that was the right way to work now. That is a new way of working. And that made them also emotionally not connected to the organization. So one of the things, and that I think for us was the most powerful thing to do, is to be able to just do this in a very passive way. Not make it so difficult for them that you better come 3 days a week and work from office and things like that. But welcoming them in a warm way, with team building activities, with just, can you come over? We're going to do a potluck. We're going to do a cultural sensitization initiative where so many of you have onboarded from various different cultures within the organization. You have not got a chance to meet your team members. You've just not got the chance to meet your colleagues. So why don't you come over and, we'll meet in office and go to arena to play, right? So you get to know each other. You get to bond with each other. And that in itself is an organization giving you a message saying, I'm emotionally available for you and I care about you. And the other important thing that we were able to do really well is, Sham, bring about this whole being able to give them some therapeutic advice, right? Some of the employees had gone down a very bad sort of rat hole in that sense, right? Where they were feeling lonely, they were having health issues. They were not in the right mental state of mind because they were scared to get out because of COVID. And many people didn't even step out for like 2 years. So how do we provide that help for them to be able to come back to work? And through those means, like, we had a doctor 24/7. We also had a therapist, couple of therapists, in fact, sitting out of the office. There were severe anxiety issues. There were severe depression issues in some of our employees. And I think all of those we were able to address, right? So easily saying come 3 to 2 or come 2 days a week to work, that is not the story. The story is, what are you going to do differently to help them feel emotionally secure, to be able to come out to the outside world again and do the normal things that they used to do for all their lives.
True, absolutely. Good. Yes, welcome, Dr. Bang. So good to have you here. I think you are on the move.
Welcome. Sorry for some discomfort. I was out there, so for joining little late. So
okay.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you are. Yes. Okay. So taking this further, as leaders, how can we foster an emotionally intelligent culture within the teams? So can you throw some highlights, Vasundhara?
So what we typically do, I'll just give you a context of what I'll speak with reference to Pioneer, where I'm currently here, and how we as an organization are a little different compared to other organizations from where we have participants today. Pioneer Services started off as a finance and accounting shared services organization. But over the last 20 years, where it has grown to become India's an Indian multinational with presence in over 14 different locations across 6 different countries, we've also grown to have diverse service offerings in the space of HR shared services, finance shared services, digitization solutions, e-commerce, assurance, audit, and so on. And the concept of various business unit and internal business unit concept is something that is set up here. And we as HR leaders cater to the various organizations, the sub-organizations of business units within Pioneer, which have a very diverse culture and dynamics in itself. So what we see is that what is applicable to an assurance and audit practice, where we hire and engage people from the big fours and cater to global clients, is not the same as the e-commerce business, where we are catering to the largest market space. It is not the same when it comes to the HR shared services that we offer to startup organizations. So we have to be extremely cognizant of the fact that while we have the one Pioneer policy, the mindset, outlook, and emotional quotient of leaders in each of these business units is very different. And while we manage the Pyrean culture at the core, we still ensure that every business unit has the requisite culture and practices that foster the best business outcomes of that business unit. So it is an extremely different ballgame that we have to manage here. And the way we do it is we have the HR as a shared service, whereas the HR business partnering role is non-central. It is specific to each of the business units. So the business partners are able to empathize and work very closely with the very business unit leaders to be able to meet the on-ground HR connect and engagement that is required. That is not central. So we've broken down HR itself into multiple aspects. Talent acquisition, which I own, is an umbrella service offering for the various business units. And I have dedicated teams specific to each business unit that delivers. Then we have shared services HR, which is mostly outwardly focused. And that's again something which is very client specific. And the employee lifecycle management is centralized. Everything else, business partnering and learning and development, is business partner ownership. That's how we manage culture.
Very nice. Dr. Purushottam Bang, can you please share your thoughts on, as leaders, how can we foster an emotionally intelligent culture within our teams? You're from the academic background, so.
Yeah. For me, I think emotional intelligence comes through practicing or bringing into the practices wherein you develop an emotional hygiene within a person, within a group, within the organization. So not hurting anyone's emotions. That is what emotional hygiene is all about for me. And for that, what we started doing was, we started, offering a program for my MBA students. It's a 2-credit program. It's on health and wellness, wherein equal weightage is given for developing this emotional hygiene also in the MBAs, so that they can remain emotionally stable, which is a prerequisite if you want to become an emotionally intelligent. So that is how they are connected. To build that hygiene, we have been delivering this 2-credit health and wellness program, wherein we teach them through yoga how they can manage their emotions. Okay, how they can strengthen their positive emotions and reduce the negative emotions. For example, fear. For nothing we fear, right? Fear is again an emotion. So how can I manage fear? How can I come out of that fear? So through yoga as an intervention mechanism, we develop some kind of resilience towards all these negative emotions. Anxiety, for example, stress, for example, right? So how you are going to manage these negative emotions and foster the positive emotions? For example, love for everyone, be passionate about whatever that you do, right? And being kind towards others, being helpful towards others, all right? Being an ally to the needy. So all these are kind of positive emotions. How you are going to foster those positive emotions? So ultimately, it's a balance sheet of emotions for me, right? So your positive emotions have to be much above the negative emotions. You cannot eliminate the negative emotions altogether, but how can you manage better so that you remain on the positive side of the balance sheet? So through yoga as an intervention, I think we are trying to do that.
Excellent. Awesome. Great to know. Taylor, you've been connected with numerous organizations. So how do you assess their current strengths and weaknesses in the areas of EI and communication?
How do I, sorry, the question is, how do I assess it? When I'm working?
How can organizations assess their current strengths and weaknesses in the areas of emotional intelligence and communication?
Well, thank you very much. Well, I think just to, I guess I'll take a jump from the last question into that one. Actually, communications is going to be a very big part of it. But one big thing, and I loved hearing about the balance sheet. I loved hearing about being, supportive, giving ownership to different teams in how they manage all those things. I think the biggest thing in how to answer the assessment would be you need to bring emotional intelligence to the forefront within culture, within strategy, within process, you need to normalize it within teams, within leadership as a very essential element. I think first, so just to answer to go into the first question, I think giving it the value assessment. So I think we assess many different things within companies and organizations based upon, again, like success, revenue, turnover, et cetera, all these different ways that we can do our very more easy black and white assessment of how successful a team is or how successful a company is. It's a bottom line assessment, but I don't think we really have particularly good assessment measures or metrics for emotional intelligence, how well teams, I mean, you do have things like retention and things of that nature where you can see you have a lot of turnover, or you have, you can do satisfaction surveys and things of that nature. But I think really fundamentally when you're going to assess how emotionally intelligent a team is, I always look at it when I go in and start working with different companies or different individuals or with CEOs, mainly the CEOs or leadership of a company. You go in and say, what is in place? I mean, yes, have you normalized it? Is it very much a part of your strategic mission? How is your leadership on board, and what are they doing? What kind of trainings are they receiving? What kind of trainings are they not just in emotional intelligence, but emotional intelligence, the value of the emotional intelligence and the impact of the emotional intelligence. So it's not just learning what emotional intelligence is. Learning about emotional intelligence is, any very competent human being can pretty much understand what emotional intelligence is. We are, especially in India, I would say, because I find the emotional intelligence quotient to be quite high. Since I do work in India, I do find it quite high, generally speaking, when people are very much aware of the concept and very much aware of the impact of one's emotions. But how does that impact your communications? What is the translation into the communications? How is that affecting, even we just talked about remotely working. As a manager, how is your emotional intelligence assessing the way in which to best communicate with that employee who has been disconnected, who has been isolated? You may be doing different engagement activities. You may have different ways of bringing them back into the fold, this connection. But if on a daily basis you're communicating with them and you're not communicating effectively because you're not fully aware emotionally about what's going on and the emotional intelligence quotient isn't there, then you're, again, not being efficient and not being effective as you possibly could be. So the measurement standards, I think, start immediately with leadership. How is it being integrated into the company? How is it being led from the leadership down? What is the training assessment there? What is the feedback assessment? How is it being employed within teams itself? And then it translates into the way it's being used within communication.
Okay, fantastic. Richen, how does it work in your organization?
Small things matter. I couldn't agree more with Taylor when she said that there are those bottom line measurements like turnover rates or engagement scores or the number of ER cases, ethic point cases that come up. Those are like the tangible objective numbers, and they are very necessary. One needs to have those guardrails and redressal mechanisms as well. But the small things matter. Your everyday activity matters. To understand the emotional intelligence of the organization, an adjacent way to assess would be also the cultural quotient. Is the culture of the organization focusing on opportunities or on threats? And that will really define how the values are written for the organization. How much are those values cascaded and lived and given importance to? How are your leadership communication and policies done? Is it more prescriptive? Is it more participative? Is it more leading with vulnerability? Is there space? Is there a safe space to do that? Not just for leaders, but also for employees. it is what kind of events, how thoughtfully do you curate events? Is it a approach? Is your engagement calendar looking something which only caters to extroverts, only to those who come to office, but also to be inclusive of those who work maybe remotely, maybe are introverted, maybe they are part of some other resource groups, like maybe with disabilities, maybe in a special working category? How are we factoring the inclusiveness of the workforce in your practices, which will live longer than employees who stay back in the organization? So what is that story? I think those things are defined by the smaller things that we do, and that will reflect right from your CEO to the country leadership to the receptionist who's sitting in your office.
Sure, sure. Praveen, your take on this, please.
Yeah, three key pointers for evaluating or calibrating emotional intelligence. First being empathy. How many instances in the organization you are able to really realize empathetic conversations or empathetic relationship being built, both in terms of the first-time supervisors doing it with their direct reports or the managers doing it with their subordinates. Empathy is something to be practiced day in and day out, and you can see it in action, and the results could be highly motivated teams or disastrous managers managing the shop. Second, I think you being very receptive when it comes to social skills. You have to have your ears and eyes open in terms of hearing those corridor conversations. You should listen to those conversations which eventually lead to resolving conflicts or enabling conflicts to help people to survive in a very, very sophisticated manner, thereby enabling the business for betterment. Social skills could be the second one. The third one being you should be aware, and when I say aware, do you have enough mechanism in which people can present their views, their pains, their sorrows, their difficulties, their wins, their ability to present that view in a meaningful manner, whether it is a one-on-one conversation, focus group discussions, or through a whistleblower method when things are not to be discussed in public. Are you made enough opportunity for people to be publicly aware and practice awareness by institutionalizing these interventions are the key for a successful organization to really practice EI.
Sure. Fantastic. I think good points, good thoughts. I think we'll continue with more. So this one to you, Vasundhara. So what are some tangible steps that organizations can take to train the employees in the emotional intelligence and to effectively communicate?
I think as a starting point, I would like to hear more from Taylor and from Praveen, who are practicing in this area, and I'm sure they'll have a lot more realistic insights because they would have had exposure and experience of actually driving this change. But from where I have seen it, I think the first step towards enabling any form of, I wouldn't even call it training, enabling opportunities, I think self-awareness and a lot of psychometric tests which enable them to see who they are as individuals and be able to hear what is their personality type, and then realize that, there are so many other personality types that they are dealing with, and whatever conflicts they see, is not because of maybe a personal issue or an ego that usually it gets perceived, but because of the different personality types and hence the style of working that it comes about. Just creating this awareness of them being aware of they are a certain personality type and that there are other personality types that they need to deal with becomes the starting point to enable change that we need to see in terms of enhanced emotional intelligence, which then fosters interpersonal skills and then productivity.
Super, awesome. Priya, over to you. Unmute.
I think Vasundhara again brings out a very important point on cultural sensitivity and being able to sensitize folks to understand what's going on, right? And that brings me to a very beautiful topic, which is today's very hot topic in most organizations, right? When you think of emotional intelligence and emotional quotient, one of the most important things is how are we including LGBTQ? How are we including a very diverse set of population in the world at the moment? For instance, in Honeywell, we went ahead and we changed as soon as our names come up, we go his, him, her, that kind of terminology. So you know what you like to be called. Or I can, next to my name, put her, she, like that. So that again gives you that sensitivity that I'm oriented in a different way. Maybe my name says something else, but how do I like to be called? So that's also a powerful sentiment, right? To be able to understand how differently they would like to be treated and what they, as diverse population as we are, would like to be called or how we want to be spoken to. And even like nuances based on the personality assessment or the psychometric assessment that Vasundhara touched on. Some people are naturally introverted, but they have so much information. How do you get them to open up? And then how do you complement the team with the right set of elements within the organization, right? So I am the leader. Maybe I am emotional. Maybe I am very extroverted. But how do I complement my team with the rest of the team being a little different from me? So when I go into the room, then the understanding that I have of my team is also good because I've done the assessment. And then I'm also being able to leverage their strengths based on that emotional understanding that I have of the individuals in my team. And overall, I think it again stitches back to once I do the assessment of the psychometric, how do I then sensitize the entire team to the type of personalities in the organization? And then also do a training around how you could be emotionally different with everyone, or how you need to be a lot more effective in listening better and also communicating better based on the type of business needs and personality traits that you see.
Sure, thanks. Dr. Bang, what would be the tangible steps that you would suggest?
Yeah, I think I agree with all the speakers, especially the Praveen Kamath sir, who said about being, nurturing empathy within the organization or the institution is the key, right? And to bring in that, you need, and one can, bring in some serious interventions. For example, yoga. I'm a profound follower, believer in yoga. So emotional quotient, emotional health can be built through yoga. So it can be thought as one powerful intervention through
Okay, I think by the time we get him back. So I think I also wanted to tailor
don't
your...
spend much time on reflection.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yeah, you're back after a 12 second break. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, I was talking about interventions. So yoga as one intervention tool wherein you can help the people in developing that emotional quotient, strengthening that emotional health or hygiene. And second one is the reflection I was talking about, is providing some space and time for each and every employee to reflect on their actions and decisions. Right? Was it right? Was it well thought after? How can I would have done better? So somewhere, some space and time to reflection as an tool to manage emotions, right? So like this, if we can bring in some good intervention, psychometric tool is another intervention to know a person better, as is, where is, who is basis. So these are all some tools which will help us, which will help the institution or organization to build that emotional resilience. Yeah.
Okay. So connecting with this, how does the integration of emotional intelligence into companies' culture impact the decision-making processes, Taylor?
All right, let me unmute. Well, as I've been trying to, I guess, drive the point the entire time here, it is possibly the most strategic thing you can do. As was highlighted from the very beginning, I have to say I'm so very appreciative of this panel. I think it's really, I mean, to be able to hear so many leaders speaking about the importance of emotional intelligence, which is something that is professionally, but also personally, a very big passion of mine. As a life coach, emotional intelligence coach, and an NLP practitioner, it's this is the essence of everything. So how is it going to impact the strategy, the culture, everything? It's the success of the company. It's its fundamental place. As I said from the beginning, companies, and many of the panelists today have said that companies are created, formed, run by human beings. This is why it's so important that this is the biggest element. This is the human condition. This is the human element. The emotional intelligence is the human element. We have now, and we're competing against artificial intelligence. That's the brain part. That's the part that can be replicated. But what cannot be replicated is the emotional intelligence aspect, the empathy, for example, we said, the awareness that we've been talking about, which is incredibly important, the different social skills and skills in which to adapt, learn, thrive, and grow from developing emotional intelligence. So it should be very much integrated woven into, if you will, the framework of any culture within any organization, and integrated that way from the beginning, ideally, but if it's an already existing culture, being an essential focus. And that starts with the leadership. We've talked a lot here about people we should be aware, our leadership should be aware, the people that are working within teams should be aware of these things, that we should help them. But it's not just, the awareness is very important. Awareness is about 60 to 70% of what we're doing. In order to convert someone to bring more emotional intelligence and have greater impact in the way in which they are behaving, in which they are communicating, and in which they are presenting themselves within teams and building teams, we do need to have significant amount of awareness, or there will be no change. But beyond the awareness, they need to feel empowered to make those changes. They need to have the tools in order to make those changes. And then in addition to that, there needs to be a value proposition as to why to make those change. We as human beings are motivated. There's two different ways that we're motivated, depending on, again, the tests that we can take, them psychometric tests. Like, are we motivated by that's the way our personality, or are we conceptually? Either way, figuring out within our teams. And again, that brings in the whole diversity question. We had a little bit of discussion about diversity, about inclusion, all those different things. But when we approach bringing into our culture, we want to make sure that we're addressing all of these different issues, and that it's not just the awareness, that it needs to be there, that it's part of it's in the landscape. We talk about it, it's everywhere. But it's not just the awareness and then the training, but it's also the value proposition, what the real end value of this is. It's not just this is going to make us better, or this is going to make it easier, but there's actually a more profound value proposition, which I think is this emotional hygiene. I absolutely adore that term. I have to say, the emotional hygiene, if every single member of every team had higher emotional hygiene, because I'll use the doctor's word there, if we had higher emotional hygiene, not only would we be more efficient, would that bottom line be positively affected, but as teams, our happiness, our contentment in work, a lot of the issues that we are up against, that we're facing, that is a big challenge for an organizational behavior, a big challenge when it comes to building and forming teams, would be significantly negated, because people would be they'd be heard, they'd be included, they'd be seen, because they would have an attachment to that value proposition. So I think that that's the important part as well.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
And Praveen, thanks, Taylor. And Praveen, would you like to add some more?
So mine is very, very prescriptive. We can see and feel and practice three value proposition, in my opinion, during hiring, through refreshing and through differentiating. Let me explain this to you. If you need to hire people with emotionally quotient a very high emotional quotient. We continue to believe IQ is the main driver for successes in an organization. Do we have competency-based recruitment platforms which can really evaluate, time-tested baseline questions which will integrate into cultural insights of the individual coming and joining us? So very clearly during hiring, it has to be integrated into an organization, competency metric for hiring. Through refreshers, what I mean by through refresher, from time to time, do I have leaders who has 100% say-do ratio when it comes to what I say and I do, matching with my own beliefs of cultural insights or beliefs of relationship insights, beliefs of LGBTQI plus. So unless and otherwise, we have people who can believe and execute this in action 100% of the time, these will be biblical conversations within the organization through refresher. And the last one is by differentiating people who are anchors of change in the organization. Are you willing to have enough and more people who can really build as captains of change by coach to coach, by having master for the best? So we need to identify, if we have a safety team, if there is an emergency, we have certain masters who can do that well, right? So we need to have the masters to do this well.
Sure. Thanks. Priya, your words on this?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of training, it's a lot of education, it's a lot of awareness, and completely agree with the points that Taylor made and Praveen made as well. But in large organizations, we just lose track of emotions and that employees matter, and employee related aspects that are more important is the emotional intelligence part of it, right? Like, how am I going to be more sensitive? I think net of it, if culturally, like in Google, it's in the cultural DNA of the organization. I know that in the recent past, they've been in bad light for all of the stuff that happened there, but they have a really good training on emotional intelligence that I've myself experienced through a colleague of mine who joined there. And then Microsoft has leadership related values and systems that are embedded from an emotional quotient, emotional intelligence perspective, right? And again, if you take into considering some of the new organizations like Flipkart even, right? They also have it in their value systems from a leadership perspective. What are the embodiments of a leader? Emotional quotient, emotional intelligence is one of the key ones there. Because as you go through the journey as a startup, one of the things you lose out on is being emotionally, savvy, intelligent, understanding what the employee is looking for, or even like the leadership teams, peer to peer, the competition, the craziness that happens. So I think all of these are important elements to be embedded in the DNA of the organization. And that will only happen if you drive it top down and also drive it bottoms up, but top down more importantly, because culture, in my humble opinion, is driven top down. And leaders, what they say and what they speak is what will be spoken by the rest of the employees in the org.
Very true. It says culture eats strategy for breakfast. Okay. All right. So are there any specific sectors or industries where emotional intelligence and communication skills are very, very vital? If so, why? I would like to have Dechen take this question, please.
We are undeniably in a VUCA world, and competition is not just another organization. It is all those unformed, unrealized ideas which are going to become unicorns of tomorrow. It is also a disruptive law. It is also just a changing world economic scenario. So competition and disruption can come from any side. To the same effect, in today's world, in such a world, I don't think emotional intelligence or communication is restricted to any particular, least of all industry sector, but least of all not limited just to organizations. It is a world need. It is a need in families. It's a need in, of course, organizations. It's a need between governments. It's a need of the world order. we have enough and more studies which directly or indirectly indicate that emotional intelligence and good communication, open communication, leads to psychological safety. Psychological safety leads to productivity, and higher productivity leads to more profits, for which organizations are here for, if that's what we're talking about. When that chain is realized and accepted as part of your reality, it helps organizations build long-term strategies. It helps in taking a long-term sustainable solution. That will reflect in decisions like the budgets you allocate for culture building. And that can be, culture building can be an overarching umbrella under which you have things like values, and you have trainings, you have redressal mechanisms, you have your hiring decisions. All of these matters. So I personally do not believe that it is one industry over another.
Okay.
All organizations are high touch now.
Okay, equally important. And we are just hitting the 1 hour mark. There are a couple of questions. Of course, we are going to continue this question as well. If it's okay to all the panelists, can we probably say extend it by another maybe 10 minutes?
10 is 5. I have a hard stop at 4:15 because something else. I had actually kept a buffer of 15 minutes, so I can accommodate that.
Yeah, sure. So, Vasantara, I think from what Dejan said, can you add in your thoughts further to it on specific industries that you think might need more of EI and communication skills?
I think India, especially where it's headed, I'm talking from a overall national agenda that's going to be there in the coming decade or decades. I think one that is going to take center stage is going to be the traditional manufacturing as well as the new age manufacturing industries, because there is a lot of Make in India, diversification, policy driven, government driven as of today. So that said, what's going to happen is we are going to see a boom in the non-IT sectors. It could be in the area of manufacturing, and it could be in the area of ancillary solutions around the core manufacturing itself. And with that, of course, the infrastructure and the hospitality. Hospitality is still a lot more organized when it comes to training and enabling talent readiness for the industry in the organized sector. But in the tier 2, tier 3 cities where actually these industries are going to get set up, you're not going to see too many of the brands in the hospitality. So long story short, what I'm trying to say is the next 2 to 3 decades, we're going to see a major boom in manufacturing, ancillary, and in the associated industries. And that's an area I think it is still not very robust, the emotional intelligence related training and grooming. And that's an area I think that would need a lot of focus.
Okay, fantastic. And I would like to have some real life example this time, Dr. Purushottam Bangsa. Can you describe a situation where a lack of emotional intelligence or poor communication having a major significant negative impact on an organization or the team? Can you highlight?
Yes, I think so. Am I audible, by the way?
Yeah. Yes, you are. Yes.
Because here you're talking about the entire, all the emotions of all the different people working together for a common purpose. So somewhere that commonality has to come. Understanding one another's emotions and trying to sympathize or empathize with his emotions, connect with his emotions, because each one's upbringing is different, background is different, ethnicity is different. So they normally carry a different emotional values or whatever. So somewhere, how can we bring them together? I try to reflect that in the form of the organizational culture. So that is what is the crux, I think, through which we can handle any kind of situation. Right? Especially during COVID, we have seen, many at least in my institution, many employees have faced that trauma a lifetime, right? Then you cannot just take it as one another situation. You have to deal it with a separate eyesight and separate intent, separate emotions. So how is organization capable of doing that, handling each one's emotions? Is there any way, have we brought that kind of a thing woven into the organizational culture? So somewhere, if each one of us start thinking like Krishna, who is supposed to be emotionally very intelligent, that is what we all learn from Mahabharata and Gita, rather than being like a Arjuna or a Duryodhana or a Karna who had some emotional issues, some emotional stigma attached to them. Okay, so if we can turn each one into Krishnas, I think we would have wonderful, thriving organizations and institutions. And that is where, again, I go back to yoga, because somewhere some intervention is needed. Without intervention, you cannot bring in those changes. Yoga is the place where you actually indulge your emotions into the practice, not only the mind, but also the emotions into the practice. So that is when you start understanding emotions, your own emotions, other emotions, when you can connect better and you can take decisions in a better way.
Well, nicely put. Praveen, any real life examples that you could?
One of the key practices we have here in the organization within Wipro, our chairman himself, Rishad, spends quite a good number of hours talking about 5 habits which we have, the spirit of Wipro and the culture. Wipro culture conversation is a conversation which he had with more than 100,000 employees, spending his valuable time over a period of last 36 months. I think hats off to our chairman for really doing it in action and really complying to the say-do ratio being 100%. That's one practice which I think we can see and feel and practice day in and day out. Other than these, I think as HR professionals, I think one of the key practice which we need to constantly nurture, because we are in the services of human resources, wherever there is a word called services, I think which requires us to nurture the key element of say difficult conversation or a consulting conversation or a business conversation. Now, all these have a common element. The output could be a team, the output could be larger business, output could be a dissatisfied customer, but the path to the end is the process of being emotionally strong. The path, the means to the end is extremely important. And I think it doesn't negotiate with who's the person who can do this well. I think everybody has the path towards making sure your businesses, your people, your team, and your customer is happy. If the path is well understood, we will be able to deliver the desirable goals for the larger organization and larger good of the society.
Fantastic. I think it's been a wonderful time with you all, and thank you all so much for being part of this interesting insight sharing online session. So, ladies and gentlemen, emotional intelligence and effective communications are, I would call it, as tandem engines that can actually propel all businesses beyond the horizon of ordinary. So as we gather here, let's envision a future where businesses aren't just the brick and mortar ones, but I would say a thriving ecosystems of empathy, innovation, building resilience, and collaboration. So thank you all for part of this wonderful journey today. Let's set sail into the world of possibilities. Thank you all so much.